Quinn. Heroe wasn't someone who paid much attention to warnings, especially not the kind scrawled on crumbling space markers or hidden deep within obsolete star maps. He flourished in the places where technology had failed, where others saw only threats and destruction. To him, they were riddles, ancient ones, beautiful in their decay. The transmission had originated from the fringe of the boring drift, an endless wasteland of hollowed-out ship remnants and fractured moons. Quinn had pursued the signal for days, watching it flicker unpredictably across his ship's interface. A distress call, weak and old, not artificial, not from any recognized protocol. It pulsed like something with a heartbeat. He followed it to a tomb. Suspended in the void was a vessel, or what remained of one. Its exterior was caved inward, as though crushed by some stellar fury. It drifted in silence, half lost in a mist of space dust, tethered only by forgotten memories. The structure was older than anything Quinn had encountered. It wasn't just broken, it had been forsaken, lost to the passage of time. His ship latched onto it with a strained groan and hiss. Lights flickered as Quinn stepped through the airlock, boots scraping against metal layered with frost. The atmosphere was frigid, lifeless. He didn't expect to find anything living, but as he stepped into what appeared to be a collapsed storage bay, he froze. Bound in chains and fused with the ship's metallic framework was a figure far too large for the space, too motionless to be merely asleep. Its skin was pallid, nearly transparent, shimmering with fractured light. Two massive horns arched backward from its skull, like sculpted ice. Its wings lay draped over shattered crates, unmoving. Its breath came shallow and uneven. An albino dragon. Quinn didn't speak, didn't inhale. He just stared. Then one of the dragon's eyes opened, and for a heartbeat, the room felt flooded with centuries of silence. It didn't snarl, it didn't roar, it simply observed him. And when it spoke, there were no words, only a whisper inside his mind. "You are not one of them." Quinn's pulse quickened. He stepped closer. "No, I'm a mechanic. I tracked your signal." The dragon blinked slowly. "They abandoned me here in silence. I cannot move." The chains shimmered softly, a reddish glow, ethereal and alive. They weren't forged from any material Quinn recognized. They were ancient, unnatural, intelligent. He examined them, then looked back at the creature. "You're paralyzed." "My spine was severed before they bound me, my fire extinguished, my wings muted." Something shifted in Quinn then. Not terror, not reverence, sorrow. I don't know how I can help," he murmured, guilt pressing in. "You came. That alone is more than any being has done in over a century." The derelict ship creaked around them, and for the first time, Quinn no longer saw a beast. He saw someone left to die. The next hours passed in a blur. Quinn returned to his ship, retrieving every tool he could carry. Scanners, arc cutters, energy drivers, even a prototype plasma torch he hadn't dared to use since the Hallmark incident. He spread them across a crushed crate and began his work. The chains weren't merely mechanical. They hummed with alien energy, flaring when he approached too closely. Some sizzled at his touch, others disrupted his scans with coded hostility. The dragon watched in silence. "I need your name," Quinn said, kneeling beside the thick band coiled around the dragon's chest. "I need something to call you." There was a long pause. "They called me Volanthros." Quinn nodded. "Well, Volanthros. I don't care how long you've been here. No one deserves this." Volanthros didn't answer. Quinn began with the shackle on the left wing, something small enough to probe without triggering any dormant defensive systems hidden in the engravings. His scanner identified it as a hybrid mechanism, an energy lock with neural inhibitors. That explained the paralysis. The restraint didn't just bind the body, it muted the nervous system, suppressing control, locking the mind in its own cage. He moved carefully. Hours passed, sweat gathered beneath his collar despite the cold. The torch sparked once, twice, and then cut through the outer layer. The chain spasmed, recoiling like a severed nerve. Volanthros groaned, not from rage, but from relief. A low, rumbling sound. Quinn stepped back as the metal cuff thudded to the ground. A faint glow escaped the room, then faded. One wing twitched, barely, but it moved. Volanthros turned his gaze toward him. That should not have been possible. Quinn managed a tired grin. "Good thing I've never paid attention to what should be." He collapsed beside the dragon, chest heaving. For the first time, Volanthros breathed without pain. And in that ghost-quiet vessel, something ancient stirred. something not even time or chains could smother. The days that followed became ritual. Quinn returned again and again, venturing deeper into the ruins, carrying with him tools, diagrams, and supplies no human had ever imagined using on a being like Volanthros. There were no guides for fixing alien dragons, no schematics for unlocking spiritual binds inscribed with forgotten languages. But Quinn had never been one to follow instructions. He approached the restraint around Volanthros' spine with the focus of a surgeon and the persistence of a junker. These bindings were different. They weren't just restricting movement. They were intertwined with nerves, tiny tendrils of radiant material embedded directly into flesh and bone. Volanthros clenched his teeth as Quinn reached for them, not out of rage, but caution. This pain has defined me for 100 years. If you sever it, you sever what's left of me. Quinn hesitated, one hand resting on his plasma cutter. You don't need to remain who you once were, he murmured gently. You can become something new, something unchained. For a while, the dragon remained silent. Then slowly he gave a nod. This time, the sparks blazed intensely. The creature's flesh pushed back, shrieking through the cutter's lens, as if the agony itself refused to let go. Quinn worked through the tremors, drenched in sweat, cursing under his breath, aimed at no one and everyone. He bypassed neurolinks, rechanneled degraded circuits, and finally, with a sound like steam escaping the lungs of a god, the spinal restraints split apart and crumbled into ash. Volanthros arched, his chest rising as though breathing for the first time in an age. His wings twitched, timid at first, trembling, then again, wider this time, stretching out across the hangar, brushing against the fractured ceiling with a resounding thud. He was still partly immobilized, but less so. That was enough. Quinn sank to the floor, arms heavy, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. Volanthros looked down at him. "You owe me nothing," the dragon said. "I didn't need a reason." Quinn replied hoarsely. "I heard you breathe." And somewhere deep in the wreckage of that forgotten ship, a shackle far older than any metal began to splinter. The sky above Quinn's outpost changed the morning Volanthros stepped outside. Not with clouds, but with pressure. For days, Quinn had sheltered the recovering dragon under the frame of a converted maintenance hangar. His property was isolated, surrounded by sun-scorched cliffs and dusty plains, far from any settlement or curious eyes. He preferred it that way. No chaos, no authority, just engines, wind, and solitude. But now there was fire, light on the horizon. Not from the sun, not from a forge, from ships. They descended without announcement, 5 of them, shaped like obsidian blades. They moved in eerie unison. The skies parted in silence. Gravity twisted. The ground shifted beneath Quinn's boots as he stepped outside, shielding his eyes. Inside the hangar, Volanthros stirred, his breath catching. "I recognize those vessels," he said. Quinn turned. "Friends?" "Worse," the dragon said. "Judges." The ships hovered low before settling in a precise circle around the property. Each one exhaled a deep mechanical growl. The air turned electric, the wind stopped. From the largest ship, a ramp extended. They didn't storm out like soldiers. They drifted, 5 figures, tall, wrapped in robes threaded with shifting silver strands that formed symbols like ancient script. Their skin shimmered like polished pearl beneath moonlight. Their eyes were blank, not empty, but endless, as if each gaze held millennia. The leader stepped forward, his voice smooth and cold like brushed chrome. "We detected a signal, a resurgence, a violation." Quinn crossed his arms. "You came to make sure he stays buried." The figure tilted its head. "We came to verify what should be impossible." Behind him, Volanthros emerged, limping, his steps uneven, wings dragging, his gaze a storm. The envoys flinched. Even in weakness, his presence struck them. "You bound me in silence," Volanthros growled, his voice raw but rising. "You sealed me in metal and ghosts, and still, I rise." "You were a weapon," one hissed. "We forged you to defend the line. You betrayed that purpose." "No," the dragon replied. "I chose compassion." The lead envoy lifted a hand, signaling the rest, and then something extraordinary occurred. Volanthros raised his head. The silver along his spine glowed. The scars Quinn had cut through began to shine. He pulsed with light, each incision, each patch, every slice of chain transformed into burning radiance. Though his body remained partially broken, it now shimmered like a constellation reborn from ruin. He didn't roar, he sang, a melody of rebirth, and all 5 ships, without firing, without a word, lowered their weapons. The envoys stepped back. They bowed. And Quinn, smeared in grease and disbelief, understood something. He hadn't just repaired a dying dragon. He had awakened a god. The envoys spoke no further. They dropped to their knees in silence as Volanthros stood beneath the rising light of the twin Zephyr moons. His breath curled into the cold morning air. And though his limbs still quivered, his eyes burned with a clarity that sent tremors through the dust. Quinn didn't move. He remained at the edge, hands stained in oil and dried blood, unsure if he had saved a soul or disturbed a cosmic balance no human should ever touch. The glow pulsed dimly, like a held breath. Volanthros advanced with careful, measured steps. With every move, the silver radiance along his ancient wounds intensified, transforming his scars into threads of luminous life. The envoys bowed their heads lower in reverence. At last, the lead envoy straightened. "We believed the chains had extinguished your flame. We were convinced we had grounded your wings for eternity." Volanthros didn't respond immediately. He looked to Quinn. "This one did more than free me. He heard me." The envoy's eyes flickered, not empty, but stirred. He shouldn't have been able to break the seal. It was designed to respond only to those born of starlight. "He wasn't born from the stars," Volanthros said softly, but he remembered what the stars themselves had forgotten. The remaining envoys gradually stood. One stepped forward, presenting a small, glowing crystalline device that emitted a gentle hum. "We come not in hostility, but in search of understanding." Volanthros dipped his head. "Then listen." He inhaled deeply. As he exhaled, his voice transformed, not into sound, but into radiant hues. A wave of shimmering light emerged from his throat, spiraling upward like a flame spoken into being. Ancient runes danced midair, elegant and eternal, weaving through the stillness like whispered history. The envoys stood in awe. It was the Elder Tongue, the original language of his kind, believed lost. A voice not made for war, but for memory. In the center of it all stood Quinn, still human, still silent, watching the sacred fire language stretch across the sky. He realized with disbelief that somehow his hands had brought this forgotten miracle back to life. As Volanthros finished, the glow faded and the moons returned to prominence. One envoy turned to Quinn, voice full of reverence. "Do you understand what you've done?" Quinn blinked. "Fixed a dragon?" The envoy smiled. "You resurrected a god with a socket wrench." Volanthros laughed, a deep, rolling sound that stirred the clouds themselves. And for the first time in countless generations, the envoys bowed, not to a captive, but to a myth reborn. By nightfall, the ships had powered down. The envoys remained, forming a silent perimeter around the homestead, quietly observing, asking questions, recording fragments of Volanthros' recovery with trembling hands. None dared interrupt. None attempted to reclaim him. The fear had been replaced by awe. Quinn saw it in their eyes. They were struggling to comprehend something no manual or doctrine had prepared them for. Inside the hangar, Volanthros lay stretched across the floor, immense and magnificent, despite still healing. His tail flicked slightly as Quinn adjusted a fusion coil near the spinal brace, keeping the dampeners active to prevent the surge of new energy from overwhelming the damaged tissue. "You're running hotter every day," Quinn muttered, tightening a bolt. "I can feel my wings again." "Think you'll be flying soon?" Volanthros turned his great head. "If I did, would you come with me?" Quinn chuckled. "I'm a mechanic, not a pilot. You're the mechanic who restored a starlit being using little more than rusted tools and pure resolve. That makes you far more than a pilot." Quinn looked away, uncomfortable under the weight of such praise. "You don't need me. Not anymore." Volanthros' voice lowered. "I needed you more than I needed my freedom." Quinn froze. He looked up at the dragon, the one once entombed beneath dust and silence, whose very name had been erased from history. In those eyes forged from stardust, he saw something unbreakable. "You really believe that? You didn't just mend my flesh, you remembered who I was." Outside, the wind picked up. Something shimmered high in the sky. Volanthros' head turned sharply. "The stars are calling." Quinn followed his gaze. "You're sure?" "They know I've returned, and not all will greet me in peace." Quinn glanced at his garage, at a half-assembled ship frame hidden beneath a tarp. Just another abandoned project he'd never dared finish. "Guess it's finally time I finished that old bird," he said. Volanthros smiled, eyes glowing like twin suns on the verge of collapse. "You've always had wings. You just forgot how to build them." Then he rose, taller, more powerful than before. The final traces of paralysis had vanished, and with them came a rising storm, not of fire or wind, but of stories begging to be lived. The hangar doors creaked open, their rusted rails straining under the weight of what was coming. Quinn stood at the control panel, hand hovering over the last lever, watching the dragon through the mist. Volanthros's silver-white wings spread wide, too vast for the hangar, almost too grand for the sky. "Ready?" Quinn asked, the words barely more than breath. Volanthros gave no reply. He simply stepped forward, each step more confident, until his claws met open ground. Beyond the cliffs, the envoys stood silently, their ships casting elongated shadows across the valley. They made no move. They simply watched, like keepers of ancient truth witnessing its return. Quinn stood at the platform's edge, shielding his eyes as sunlight pierced the clouds and spilled like molten gold. The dragon raised his head. His wings unfurled completely, glowing with heat, with memory. And then he ran. A thunderous gallop, his limbs pounding the earth, and with one final surge, he leapt. He didn't fall, he soared. The wind caught him mid-arc, lifting him higher with a cry that split the sky. That shattered the quiet beneath. It wasn't a roar, it was a cry of liberation, a burst of joy too immense to be contained. His body twisted mid-air, wings beating, tail curving like a comet's trail across the heavens. The clouds parted as the silver deity returned. Quinn watched, breath caught and throat tight. It felt like witnessing the impossible come to life. Volanthros dove once, then surged upward, faster than sound, beyond the storm. The sky seemed to bend around him, and when he descended again, he was not alone. A ripple spread through the air, faint, flickering lights like embers from a shattered cosmos blossomed around him. Ghostly silhouettes of other forms, dragons, celestial beasts, long-deceased brothers, whispered across the sky in his wake. Echoes. Quinn's hands trembled as he grasped the enormity of what he was witnessing. Volanthros wasn't merely flying, he was summoning them back. By the time he touched down, the valley had transformed. The air shimmered, the earth hummed. The envoys had fallen to one knee. Volanthros turned to Quinn. "They remember me. You gave them something to remember," Quinn murmured. "No, you did." The world had shifted, and at its core stood a mechanic and the dragon he resurrected from silence. Chapter 8. The Ones Who Feared the Light. The sky darkened before the second arrival, not a natural dusk like Zephyr's horizon or the gentle passage of moons overhead. This was deliberate, a cold, unnatural shadow pushing through the clouds, swallowing stars as it advanced. Quinn was inside the garage when the power flickered. The air grew still. Even the envoys, usually composed and stoic, looked up, unease breaking through their calm for the first time. Volanthros emerged from his resting place beneath the cliffs, wings folded, eyes sharp. "They've come." "Who?" Quinn asked. "The ones who shackled me, the architects." Quinn stepped outside, jaw tight. The descending ship bore no resemblance to anything he'd ever seen. Silent, angular, a perfect obsidian wedge etched with constellations foreign to their sky. It didn't fly. It glided, a crack in the atmosphere that swallowed sound. It landed far beyond the envoy's neck, but everyone felt its presence, like cold water poured over a fire. A lone figure appeared, clad in white. No armor, no visible face, only a mask carved from starlight and silence. Volanthros spread his wings, rising with a growl that seemed to shake the very stone beneath them. "You dare return after 100 years?" The architect's voice didn't carry. It infiltrated minds like frost. "You were never meant to come back." "I was never meant to be forgotten," Volanthros spat. "You defied orders. You showed them mercy. And for that, I was broken." Quinn stepped between them, fists clenched. "Is that your idea of justice? Shackling a being because he refused to kill for you?" "He was not a mere creature," the voice echoed. "He was a weapon, forged to burn away darkness. And he chose not to." Quinn snapped, "And he chose wisely." The architect's mask turned toward him. For a moment, the wind ceased. "You, mortal, think your hand rewrote fate?" Quinn stepped forward, chin raised. "I didn't rewrite fate. I reminded it that mercy isn't a flaw." Volanthros surged behind him, light seeping through his scars once more. "If you came to kill me, then do it. If you came to threaten, leave." The architect tilted its head. "We came to see if anything left of you was worth remembering." Then, the figure stepped back into the ship. No battle, no war, just departure. Before the ship vanished, a final message echoed in their minds. Then be what they need, Flameborn. The stars are awakening once again. As the shadow receded into the sky, the valley seemed to exhale. Quinn turned to Volanthros. You knew they wouldn't fight. They never needed to. Their true weapon was erasing me. He looked up as stars flickered back into constellations long lost. The night after the architect's departure was thick with tension, as if the valley itself held its breath. Volanthros perched atop the ridge overlooking Quinn's land, wings folded, his glow a steady pulse. Below, the envoys gathered by the fire Quinn had built, not for warmth, but as a symbol of presence. They had questions, theories, scriptures to rewrite, but none dared voice them aloud. Quinn sat on the steps outside his workshop, fingers stained with engine grime and oil. He hadn't stopped, working on the old sky crawler by day, refining it, enhancing it, reforging the chassis with alloys gifted by the envoys, metal gleaming like moonlight infused with stardust, not meant for escape, nor for battle, but for soaring. A faint tremor rolled beneath the earth, soft as a whisper. Volanthros approached silently, his talons pressing into the soil without a sound. His massive form cast long shadows across the cluttered landing pad. His gaze, as always, carried the burden of ages. You've rebuilt your wings, he remarked, eyeing the crawler. Quinn gave a slight, knowing smile. Figured I couldn't let you have all the excitement. The dragon's tail slowly curled behind him. Tomorrow, Volanthros spoke, I will depart this realm. I must heed the summons of the bridges I once guarded. The darkness stirs anew, and if I don't rise now, there may be no chance to rise later. I understand, Quinn replied. I realized the moment I broke the first chain. Silence settled between them, comfortable, genuine. Then Volanthros lowered his head until his muzzle was level with Quinn's. I want you to come with me. Quinn's chest tightened. I'm not a warrior, not a guardian. I repair things, patching holes, removing rust. Volanthros blinked slowly. That's exactly what I've always needed. Quinn gazed at the stars. Are you sure? I've never felt more than that. A thunderclap shattered the sky, though it wasn't thunder. A ripple of light surged across the atmosphere, violet and gold pulsing in a rhythm like a heartbeat above them, far beyond the clouds. The stars began to shift, not blinking but moving, aligning into patterns unseen for centuries. The envoys rose to their feet. Volanthros spread his wings wide, casting light over the clearing. It's beginning, he whispered. The bridges are awakening. Without hesitation, Quinn stood. I'll go. Dawn ignited like flames on the horizon. The valley glowed with the converging power of the stars. At its heart, two beings stood ready, one forged in fire and sorrow, the other shaped by calloused hands and human determination. Volanthros stretched his wings toward the sky, shimmering with raw memories. Quinn stood beside his completed crawler, its thrusters humming softly. The cockpit designed not for comfort, but for purpose. The envoys bowed as Volanthros lowered his head to the earth. Quinn climbed atop his back, one hand steadying himself against the rigid plating. Once chained, now pulsing with energy. Freedom. The crawler launched first, ascending and folding into its orbit mode. Not built for long voyages, but enough to prove humanity's rightful place among the stars. Then Volanthros took flight. Unlike before, he didn't struggle against the wind. This time, the air embraced him. Each beat of his wings tore the dawn wider open, until the sky blazed with gold and silver. He soared higher, passing through clouds, breaking the upper atmosphere's silence. Quinn held on, smiling into the vast void. He glanced back once, noticing the 5 alien ships still stationed, smaller now, as if they too had awaited this moment. Then he looked ahead, towards blinking lights, massive gates once sealed but now trembling, bridges between stars opening, waiting. Volanthros roared, not from pain or fury, but a call of welcome, a sound that shattered the cold and dispersed lingering fear. Quinn closed his eyes, and together they crossed the threshold, not as mechanic and beast, but as legend and companion. Because what began in a broken ship concluded among the stars.